Okay, before I get into this, from what was meant to be a sort of equivalent of a B-side to the TR08 comparisons, this has turned out to be much more comprehensive than I'd originally planned. There are so many little things to look at that it's going into a much longer video than I'd anticipated. So I thought I'd give you an executive summary here of my findings before we get going. So you can either stick around and watch to the end of this, or go and check out some of the other videos. So findings: 1. Size. Obviously RD8 is much larger and it's much easier to get hands on, but the TR08 is more portable and you can stick it in a bag. Sound wise, they are different slightly. They both sound like 808s. There's no, you would not say in a mix either of them didn't sound like an 808. But I think the TR08 sounds brighter and cleaner, and the RD8 has got a bit more grit and perhaps an overall smoother sound. From a programming perspective, the TR08 sticks faithfully to the 808s. If that's what you're after, then the TR08 is bang on. The RD8 feels a bit more intuitive to me and you can edit the songs, whereas mistakes programming the TR08 need you to start from scratch. But really, the much of a muchness, neither's more complex or difficult than the other. But playing live, the RD8 wins hands down here. I mean, it's got additions like it's got the filter, it's got the step repeat, the note repeat, and mutant solo are sort of easily accessible. The original TR808 was never intended to be played that way. You can still access mutant solo for a few button presses, but it just doesn't flow as well as the RD8 does live. Outputs, so individual outs versus a single stereo. The TR08 does have individual outputs over USB, but that doesn't really help in a live situation as you're likely to have latency issues. But you can record individually simply into your DAW. Flexibility of sounds, well, the TR08 has more MIDI control and more tuning, gain and pan options with an additional long decay kick. And analog versus digital, it just doesn't bother me really if the sounds are right and they both sound nice. But my overall shot conclusion is, for me, perhaps the Roland Cloud version is the best for the studio. And now that's over, we can get stuck into the longest B-side of all time. But it's thorough and demos everything I've just summarised. So let's start by going through some sounds. Okay, let's have a listen to that pattern from the intro again. Let's hear it on the RD8. And again on the TR08. Now I've matched the sounds as best I can. I'll go through each of them individually now and just show you the sort of the flexibility that I suppose that you have in the TR08 that you don't have in the RD8 in the sort of sub-menus. And you'll notice I'm using a MIDI keyboard to demo the sounds, and that's because there's no easy way of accessing the sound from the front panel in sort of play mode, as it were, like there is on here. They've got the trigger button. But what I realised halfway through is that's quite a simple way of doing it. If you go into menu and you go to either gain or to pan, you can play any of the sounds. And that's so that you can hear what you're doing while you're adding the gain or panning or changing the tune, whatever you're doing in the menu. And playing the sounds by MIDI also means that you can play the congas and the toms in the same pattern. So here's the toms. And if we go up an octave, there's the congas. So let's have a look at sort of the limits of what you can do on each of the sounds, shall we? So let's start off with the kick. So you can tune that on the TR08 going in the menu system, which is a little bit of a faff, but it's not too bad. So compressor, gain, tune. I've tuned that to -52 already to try and equate to that RD8 one, but let's see how far it goes. And let's see how low the RD8 goes. Put the decay up. So let's see the maximum or the highest it'll go. I think the RD8 goes higher than that. Yeah, so maybe not more flexible, just a different range. But see how easy it is to do it on the RD8. So let's leave the RD8 on its nominal by that little yellow orange dot. Yeah, the orange dot's about 0 on this. On the TR08 you also have a choice of kick drums. Actually, you've got 2 kick drums. You've got compressor, gain, tune, decay, pan, bass drum. Press tap. That's on normal, but we can change that to long decay version. And that's a nice long decay, isn't it? So the longest decay you're going to get on the RD8. And I do feel like it gave the Rolands a little bit of a hard time when I did the TR8 versus the cloud version as well, because I was distorting the cloud because I had the micro key air set at 127 rather than at 64. And distortion starts to creep in when you put anything over 100. You know, not by mistake, it is programmed in. Okay, so evening them up again. I'm listening to the pitch bend. Boo! And they sound like they've got different envelopes there. It sounds like the envelope drops off exponentially quicker on the RD8 than it does on the TR08. Even though the decay length's about the same, the sound drops off quicker on the RD8. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. Actually, in a track, it might be much, much nicer to have it dropping off a bit quicker so it doesn't muddy up a mix. And by doing that, let's have a listen to the tone knob, what it does. But there's not a lot in it really, is there? Okay, moving on to the snare. I've turned the tone on the snare down. They're really close, aren't they? Bit brighter on the 08 maybe. Let's add some tone. They're as near as damn it as the same, aren't they? There are differences, but... Let's move on to the congas and the toms then. Just put them all on a sort of similar volume. And on the 08. Sounds a bit cleaner on the 08 to me. If we have a look in the menu, see what we can do to them. Let's go to the low conga. Is that adding some distortion? I'm not sure if it's just distorting through my Apollo there, but you do have that option to change it. Let's have a look what else you can change. You can change the decay. Oh, let's have a look at that. Just tune them. The lowest they'll go. So there's the RD8. Highest. Lowest. TR08 highest. Lowest. But can we tune it? Let's go in to the menu again. No. So the only real added flexibility you got on the TR08 is that you can change the decay. And you can sort of change the decay on the RD8 using the Wave Designer. Let's just try that. So added some sustain. Then add some attack. Reduce the sustain. Low sustain, low attack. Makes it a bit more whooshy. And you can put any sound through that on the RD8. Also, as the TR08 is in stereo, you can pan everything. So the congas are panned. Let's just pan the high one all the way, shall we? See what happens. So let's have a listen to the toms then. Here's the low tom. Again, the TR08 sounds a bit cleaner, doesn't it? It's got more of a gritty edge to the RD8. And we can change the decay on them both. Change the decay on the RD8 using the Wave Designer, as you could on the, well, on any instrument. Let's check the decay on the TR08. It'd be really good if Roland had labelled these 1 to 12, because it's really awkward trying to find the right one. Here we go, low tom. That's decay on full. And on minimum. So just try something like that over here, go to the send. Put the decay on full. Get much more of an effect on that. I won't bother going through the mid and the high as well, but you get the idea. They have got their own sort of flexible options, but they work in different ways. Okay, quick listen to the claves on the rim. Try that on the TR08. I know the tuning's going to be out, so I'm just going to go to tune. So, claves. Oh, not bad. On the rim. Oh, that's different, isn't it? It's a lot louder on the RD8. Just tune it a little bit higher then. Again, I keep on saying this, the RD8's got a bit more of a grittier texture, hasn't it? Okay, let's move to the maracas and the hand clap. Hand clap. You notice with that it waits before you get the reverb effect on there. Don't get any weight on this one. I heard somewhere it's about a capacitor has to get charged, but if you don't use it for a while, then you press the clap, you don't get the reverb on it. There you go. No reverb. Now it's on. And on this, you've got this offset. So that makes it sound like it's in the background. Comes to the fore. Much more to the fore. So it's almost like a mix, isn't it, between having full reverb and full signal. But it does sound like an 808 clap when it's just about 11 o'clock. Again, 08's a bit brighter. Let's move to the maracas. Brilliant, you know. So you can't tune them on this. Let's have a listen on this. Actually brighter on the RD8 and a little bit tuned a little bit higher it sounds. And now to one of the big ones, the 808 famous cowbell. Let's just tune it down a bit here. Close enough. I wonder how much you can tune this by. Quite a lot by the looks of things. So much easier if this was a slider, wouldn't it? Takes ages. Moving on to the cymbal end, and because you can't change the pitch of it, I can't trigger it from this mode. So let's go to another one. Okay. So this tone knob sounds a little bit like a high pass. Although it is taking away the transient as well, isn't it? Again, it sounds like it's working a little bit like the clap, as in it's sort of adding the transient as you turn it round. What does it do on the TR08? Similar. Let's put the decay up. So these sound different, don't they? Okay, over to the open hat. We have an additional tone on the RD-8. What does that do? Sounds a bit like a high pass. And decay. Let's try and tune this then to see if we can get it sounding more similar. As you tune the hats on the TR08, they sort of lose their clarity. It doesn't just sound like I'm pitching down a sample. Maybe on the TR08 again, it's based on the old analog circuitry and how it might go out of tune rather than just a strict, I'm going to tune it up or pitch it down. You know, some old 808s might sound like this. And some might sound like this. Just taking a stab in the dark there about what's going on. But there are different characters. And I imagine if you've got an original 808, you could probably tweak all the parameters on this to get very, very close to what yours sounds like. Okay, moving to the closed hat. Again, it's a bit like a high pass filter, this, isn't it? It's getting a lot quieter down there, up there. Again, it's pitched a bit differently. So let's try and tune this one a bit lower. Yeah, you can't match them. But again, you do have the ability to tune it on the TR08, which you don't have on the RD-8. I did record an unboxing of this, but it seems a bit too late in the day really to show people what it's like out of the box. Everyone knows what it looks like now. But the shock I had after playing with this to pulling this out of the box, it looks really, really small, because it is. And after playing with these knobs, looking at these, a huge difference in the interfaces. I do have the TR09, really like this. It does feel a little bit less cluttered though than the TR08. Because obviously on the TR08 you do have all this sort of extra sort of selecting knobs that you don't really get on the 09. So there are a similar amount of knobs on them, but these do feel a bit closer together than these. I think they are. Yeah, definitely. But looking at them side by side there, you can really see the difference in the size. Now, I'm definitely not saying bigger is better, because in a small studio, you can fit that in a drawer. You can't fit the RD-8 in a drawer. But the difference in size is obviously quite substantial. So firstly, that pattern you heard in the intro was the Roland TR08 and the RD-8 both playing exactly the same pattern. I tried to match the sounds as best as I could. So let's start taking a look at some of the other differences. Obviously, one of the big one on the RD-8 is that it has an individual output for each of the sounds, which if you've got a mixer and you want to individually affect each of them, that's absolutely fantastic. The original had that, the RD-8 doesn't. The RD-8 has stereo out only, but it has got a sort of flexible feature in it. If we go into menu, we can go into sort of output mode. I'll find it. And what this does is it splits the left and right channels effectively into channel 1 and channel 2. And when you select any sound to go into a sort of an individual output, it'll go into output 1, and the rest of the mix goes into output 2. So maybe just show you that quickly. So there I took the kick drum out of the mix, and then I took the snare drum out of the mix and put them through a separate channel. So if you did want to put, for example, your snares and your claps through a big reverb, you can do that. It would have been great if they'd have put 2 stereo outputs that you could do that with, and then you've effectively got 4 outputs, which I think could probably do you, or at least be a lot more flexible. But you do have that on the TR8. So if that's what you need and that's how you're going to use it, the TR8 or the TR8S might be the ones for you. It does have USB audio as well. Channel 1 and 2 is always the mix, and then you've got the rest of the sounds coming out of their own individual channels. And you can take the individual sounds out of the main mix. So looking at this pattern here, so I'll just play you this, and what I'll do is I'll take the kick drum out of the mix, but you can see all the other channels are still all recording everything. And it is quite flexible, and you can listen live to them on different channels with different effects, but you know, you do get latency. And to be honest, if I'm going to record the sounds on separate tracks, I tend to just play the loop 8 times or 12 times. I do that even on the Electron and on the Tempest and stuff. It just makes my workflow easier, and I'm not looking for all sorts of different MIDI leads, and I'm making new audio aggregate devices on the Mac. It's, you know, I'm coming out of Logic and going back and doing different things, so it's just simpler for me to do it that way. So to me, that's not really a problem. But if you really did want to use it and use different tracks and different effects, maybe the TR08 isn't for you, maybe the RD-8 is. Or maybe, if you're doing it all on PC or Mac, the Roland Cloud version. Without going into too much detail about how they work, the TR08 works in a very similar manner to the TR808. You have a variation A and B on each of the patterns, and you can play A or B or go from A to B. And each pattern has up to 32 steps. It's got a first part and a second part. And you can change the length of each of those parts. But effectively it plays part 1, then part 2. Part 2 is set normally at 0 steps. You've got to go in and change that if you want it to be any longer than 16 steps. So you can have 32 steps on variation A and 32 steps on variation B, which takes up to 64 steps, and anywhere in between. The RD-8 doesn't work in exactly the same way, but it does have 64 steps per sequence, and you have a polymetric mode, so every sound can have a different bar length. You've also got randomization, probability, and flam. So from a user perspective, the RD-8 is more flexible, having the probability and the flam and the polymetric mode. But the TR08 does stick more faithfully to the TR808. Other things to note, the song mode on the RD-8 is easier to edit. If you make a mistake on this, you pretty much got to start again. Okay, so now 1, 2, 3. Some other things to note, I've not found a way of increasing this by sort of a fraction of a beat per minute, whereas on the TR08 you hold bank and shuffle, and you push bank and shuffle, and you're getting into sort of hundredths of a BPM. So that's now at 115.32, I think. And finally, some sort of live aspects like muting and soloing. Really easy to do on the RD-8. Let's mute the kick drum and the snare. So let's try that again, and solo the kick and the snare. So really nice, really easy to do. You can mute and solo on the TR08, but it's a little bit more fiddly. You press this button and this button together, and you go to mute and solo mode by pressing tab. So let's turn these down a bit, and I'll do the same. I'll mute the kick and the snare. So you've got to keep that held. So it's a little bit of a pain. It's not really a great live tool for doing stuff like that. And just try soloing as well. But it can be done. And of course, the RD8's got the filter effect as well. Okay, it turns out it wasn't user error. I had to do a system reset, a full factory reset. Anyway, this is the step repeat. Which it's something similar to that, which is you have something similar on the Tempest, and it's really cool, really nice effect. But combine that with the mutes, the solos, and the filters. Huge flexibility for playing live, and obviously it's bigger. But that means it's bigger to carry in your bag when, you know, compared to that. But I've no idea what messed up there. But there are new firmware updates coming out, so I imagine there's a few little bugs in the system yet, because it is brand new out. Other little tricks that the Behringer's got are things like this, these step repeat and note repeat. So let's try a note repeat. So select the snare and then just note repeat 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 4 or 8. And step repeat, which just repeats the sequence of step that's playing. But it stopped working on this, and I've no idea why. I don't know if I've done something, but it was working earlier on. Bit of a worry, but probably more like user error. Okay, it turns out it wasn't user error. I had to do a system reset, a full factory reset. Anyway, this is the step repeat. You have something similar on the Tempest, and it's really cool, really nice effect. But combine that with the mutes, the solos, and the filters. Huge flexibility for playing live, and obviously it's bigger. But that means it's bigger to carry in your bag when, you know, compared to that. But I've no idea what messed up there. But there are new firmware updates coming out, so I imagine there's a few little bugs in the system yet, because it is brand new out. Another issue I get on this and other things with USB MIDI is that I get a ground loop hums. So it's not individual to this. My Korg MS-20 does it as well. But other synths like the OB6, the Prophet 6, and even things with audio over MIDI like my Electron, what's it called, Analog Rhythm, doesn't have that issue. So I wonder if there's some circuitry in there that things like the Korg MS-20 and the boutiques don't have that they could potentially put in there, but maybe they're not expecting it to be in a studio that's full of loads of stuff and connections all over the place. Maybe that makes things more sensitive to the ground loop. Doesn't do it at all when I just plug it into my laptop, for example. But it is there, and you might have to overcome it somewhere in your studio. Just something to note. I've overcome it by using standard MIDI and audio outs. Okay, so in conclusion, I think they both have their charms. I actually quite like the form factor of the TR08, even though I sort of laughed when I got out of the box because I've been playing with the RD8. Once you start playing with it, you really do get used to the size of it. The RD8, I can't really fault it. You know, it's got analog voices. It's nice, big, chunky design with the separate outs. I have heard people complain about the build quality, but I've not had any issues with it whatsoever. People saying that the buttons are a bit, you know, weak or something, but behind me, literally where I'm sitting, I've got a Juno 106, and I'm clicking with the buttons on that. I put new tact switches in it a couple of years ago, But they feel much more wobbly than these, I think. So, but I thought I'd better sort of even the score a bit, because I know Roland haven't done an analog version of the 808. They don't want to do one for whatever reason. But I do think the TR08 has its place, as does the TR09. So what do we do? Do we break up the set and keep the Behringer, or do I keep the TR08? Because I definitely don't need them both. And it's a tougher decision than I thought it was going to be, actually. I thought, yeah, the RD8, brilliant. It's a great big, beast of a thing. Separate out, it's fantastic. But as I do record individually anyway, I can get around that easily on the TR08. So maybe I get rid of them both and just go with the Roland Cloud. If I'm going to be studio-based, the Roland Cloud version's got the advantage of all of them. So, that could be my shock conclusion. I hope that was of some use to somebody somewhere. See you next time.